Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Massive drama emerging in F1 with the technical directive that is due to come into effect in a few races time into the 2025 season, shutting down the use of flexible wings in the sport for the time being. McLaren paved the way on this over the last season or so, but Red Bull are reportedly furious at the changes that are now being made. Rumour has it McLaren are shutting it down at the perfect time. Red Bull, after spending months of their development on flexible wings, all of that may well go to waste. Red Bull aren't happy about it. What does this mean for their championship chances this season, certainly from the Spanish Grand Prix and beyonds? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Use this here today as the intro picture just because it was a year ago today, the 1st of February 2024, when it became official that Hamilton would leave Mercedes for Ferrari. That was quite the morning. Certainly is. We talked about these rumours every so often over, maybe every couple of months, rumours were coming out about this last year that, oh yeah, well, Hamilton might go to Ferrari. We're talking 2023. And then when it happened, it started to become clear on that morning that actually there was more to this than just another day of rumours that really had no backing in reality. This is an interesting one. South Africa. We don't know if we're going to get a Grand Prix there, but we may well do. I know that Formula 1, they say this themselves, they would like to have a Grand Prix on every continent. Kyalami or just South Africa in general would make some sense for that. There's talk about Rwanda. They've got money to spend. They're going to try and spend it on a Grand Prix, it seems. But they've got no track, really. So there's obviously a lot to think about from their perspective there. And definitely there's talk that South Africa are interested. We know that the Dutch Grand Prix is gone. Maybe that's a potential replacement. Into your thoughts on that in the comments below. Speaking of Australia, the season opener, they will change the track. Not the layout, right? They've made some changes over the last few years, getting rid of one of the chicanes they used to have back in the day a few years ago. Then, of course, adding the 4th DRS zone to the circuit. I actually really like the Albert Park track. One thing that is kind of dangerous about it, though, is, of course, well, this crash. You guys might remember that this year's race, Russell crashed into the barriers and then was effectively spit out back onto the track. And that's kind of inevitable. The corner in question here at the start of Sector 2 is a tricky corner, kind of mid-sector 2 actually. It's a tricky corner, and if you lose it on the way into the corner or in the exit curb, you're in the wall. And if you hit the wall, you're getting basically ricocheted off that barrier back into the track. And it happened to Russell, and it was very dangerous. I mean, you guys probably remember the audio comms of Russell. I don't know if he was screaming or exactly, but he was like, yeah, terrified in this cockpit here with Formula 1 cars flying past him at 160 miles an hour or whatever the rough speed is through this corner section right here. But he can't see anything, and they're coming around the corner into like a blinds, shower of sparks and gravel and dust. Can't even see the guy. So very lucky, I think, there not to have a really big disastrous incident. And therefore what they're going to try and do is they're going to shut this one down, and they're going to change the way that the barriers are designed to prevent a repeat. That seems to be the plan, and hopefully that's a good idea as well. This is an interesting development. Richard Wood is going to be Liam Lawson's race engineer. He was actually Checo's performance engineer. He stepped in as race engineer during Hugh Bird's paternity leave, and it seems like Richard Wood's going to stay on as Liam Lawson's man in charge over there. We'll get back to Red Bull in a second. Just before we get to that, the GPDA is finally making their thoughts known on the situation with the FIA, the new misconduct regulations, the amount of money that they might have to get fined if they swear or cause moral injury to the FIA or any of its employees or whatever, right? You guys know the drill on that one. Suspensions, championship point deductions, all sorts of stuff. And the GPDA, I'm sure they'll give their thoughts on it. So far, they're basically saying we want some more transparency, how we're enforcing these penalties, what the plan is going to be. But yeah, I'm sure this is not ended anywhere near the present time. Let's talk, though, about the drama with Red Bull, McLaren, and just the competitiveness of the championship going into 2025. McLaren are confident, whether this is, misplaced or whatever, but McLaren believe that they can maybe take a step forward, which is going to put them out of reach. This year they won the constructors, Max won the drivers, but McLaren have said that they're trying to make this year boring. On paper, it should be a very, very competitive season. It's unlikely that anyone should find anything that will give them a sizable edge in the final year of these set of regulations. And it wouldn't be the first time that McLaren made major gains during a period of these cycle of regulations that was relatively unexpected. But Whether they can actually achieve that seems pretty doubtful. It doesn't seem like they're going to be maybe as innovative or pushing as hard as Ferrari or maybe Red Bull in terms of trying to innovate their car, but who knows? They seem to be, from a technical perspective, the strongest technical outfit over the last 2.5 years, with the progress they made certainly since 2022 and really middle of, well, let's say 1.5 years since the middle of 2023. One of the things that they not pioneered, but certainly in this set of regulations, was Flexi-Wings, Flex-Wings, whatever you want to describe them as. They've been a thing for years. You're never going to make a wing that's perfectly rigid, otherwise you'd touch it and it would break in half, right? Like, it can't be perfectly rigid, obviously. It has to bend to some extent, and we talked about yesterday what the supposed changes are going to be to make the, not only they've got to be more rigid, but also they're going to be measured in a way which is more difficult to get around. I think that's the point, really, that a lot of the static load tests, the FIA are like, okay, hey, we're going to measure the static deflection here and we're going to measure it here. And therefore, the teams can look at their wing and say, all right, well, let's design it a little bit stronger there and there so that when they test it, it doesn't deflect by as much in those spots, but actually in other spots it deflects by more. Stuff like this, the engineers are great at it, and what the FIA are trying to do is catch up and say, all right, this is a better way to approach things. The drama, though, is on Red Bull. Now, are Red Bull ever happy? Not usually, but reportedly, Washe at the team has been pushing hard for flexible wings within Red Bull, and therefore has spent a significant portion of their budget on this aero-elasticity. Now, I think for any team, this was a risk, and I think it was inevitably going to be a risk because we didn't know what the FIA were going to do about it. We know that after what happened with the mini DRS at Baku for McLaren, they clamped down on that. That was no longer a thing, no problem at all. In the front wing section, though, it was a bit more grey area, kind of difficult to say which way it should or should not have gone. And therefore, were the FIA going to clamp down on it or were they not? Turns out they are, but they're not going to do it immediately. They're going to say, all right, guys, you've got about 4 months. The rumour was yesterday, this technical directive, this new they're going to bring in this Flexi-Wing TD, basically. It's going to be a revision of TD18, and it's probably going to be something else as well that we saw a couple of years ago. And they're trying to lock down a few more things in greater clarity, really. And it will not come in immediately, because then the teams would probably all be angry, saying, well, hang on a second, the season's just about to start, and you're drastically changing the way my front wing has to be designed. So instead, they're saying, all right, you've got until May. You've got until, I think it's the Spanish Grand Prix. That was the rumour that was going around in terms of when this change will be made. But still, if you're a team that's put in loads of work to these flexible wings, and all of a sudden they're now going to get outlawed in terms of what you've put in, that's a serious issue. And this is why McLaren are apparently buzzing about this. Like, in many ways, it's worked perfectly for McLaren, because McLaren may have to admit, okay, we are no longer going to gain an advantage over the competition through flexible wings. But I would say to some extent that was absolutely inevitable, given the fact that McLaren, they pioneered it really on the front wing side, and other teams are going to catch up. It's just how it's going to be. So you're never going to maintain that lead forever. What you really don't want is for somebody else to work harder at it and then even surpass you, which definitely happens and has happened in the past and may well happen again as teams gain further understanding. So this may work out perfectly for McLaren. They've already done all their development on their Flexi Wings. They've worked it out over the last season or so. They delivered a world championship winning car as a result of that, at least in part this season. Next year, they're going to be able to use that for the first couple of months of the season. Then it's going to go away. And they've been able to put all their time and resources into developing elsewhere, whereas Red Bull have put time and resources into developing aero-elasticity, and now it's going to be outlawed. So it's not like Red Bull won't be able to gain some advantage from this early in the season, but the theory goes that by Spain, Red Bull will not be as competitive as they might otherwise have been. And, it seems like Red Bull are furious with this. That's at least the word that's been going around to describe them today, that, Red Bull are furious after investing a lot to recover ground compared to rivals on Flexi-Wings. There's also rumours that it's McLaren, really, who are leading the charge on this. They are the ones who have said, all right, we are going to push for this from the FIA, and we're going to be happy when it goes through. And that's pretty much what we're seeing, apparently anyway. McLaren have pushed for a tightening of these tests and the upcoming TD. And maybe McLaren, this is why the whole politicking behind the scenes is always so great in Formula One, because McLaren, to the FIA, said, okay, yes, we've used this mini DRS in Baku, and we know that it's probably beyond the limit, but of course technically the Mini DRS complied with the regulations, at least McLaren think it did, because it passed the static load tests, but yet it flexed certainly more than was, fair when it actually came to a Grand Prix situation in Baku, for example, when Oscar Piastri was gaining an extra 3 kph on the straights than he should have been. Probably made a big difference in terms of whether he was overtaken or not by Charles Leclerc during that Grand Prix. So McLaren, though, after that race said, all right, yeah, you caught us, we will remove it from our cars. We won't use it again, right? We won't use this flexible rear wing. You guys don't have to worry about it anymore. But of course, as a result of that, you then have McLaren saying to the FIA, all right, we did you guys a favor, so how about you guys do us a favor? And it really shouldn't work like this, but this is Formula One, and we know how things sometimes tend to operate behind the scenes. So it is a concern for Max, potentially, right? Because if Red Bull have put a lot of time and money into catching up on their deficit to the Flexi-Wings, which may have proved dividends and may well return dividends at the start of the season, but from Spain onwards, according to current rumours, their car will be developed, likely, from that point onwards, with significantly less budget than the other teams. Certainly McLaren, who knows about Ferrari, but again, Ferrari, they did manage to deliver flexible wings at the end of last season. So if there's any team this affects the most, it is probably Red Bull as it stands. And of course, they no longer have Adrian Newey to get them out of this pickle. So Red Bull last year, around about March time, February, March, was all sorts of chaos, right? The Horner drama was happening. Verstappen was maybe going to leave. Jos Verstappen was making these comments. Was he helping Marco, the Austrian side, the Thai side, whatever? It was all going on. Civil war at Red Bull was being described as. Then Newey leaves, right? Then Jonathan Wheatley's out the door as well, and there's other names that are out the picture in due course. And all of a sudden you're thinking, hang on a second here, maybe this is a problem for Red Bull in the medium term. And then you're looking at this and you're saying, well, of all the other things that are going wrong at Red Bull, this is another one that they would like to change if they potentially could. So intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below on that. Just a couple of quick things here. We know that Jack Doohan is likely, let's be honest, to get replaced by Franco Colapinto. Colapinto's proven. It doesn't seem that Alpine are especially convinced by Jack Doohan, maybe based on his testing performances and stuff like this. Colapinto, they've given a massive deal at Alpine, so there's just no way, as far as I'm concerned, they're not at least going to try him in the car. But then again, if Doohan does a good job, he may be able to hold on to it. I think the question around McLaren is quite key, because if they have played a bit of a masterclass here, they've delivered a car that was capable of winning last year's World Championship, and they may well do so again. What about their driver lineup? How competitive is this going to be? Do they have a driver lineup problem, I think is the question for you guys, because I do rate Oscar Piastri quite highly. Certainly in some regards, I think he's stronger than Lando, but in most regards, Lando's stronger than him. And if I had to, if you ran the upcoming year's championship 100 times, how many of those times does Lando finish ahead of Oscar? I'm saying probably quite a significant majority. But is it going to be a Hamilton-Leclerc situation? We don't know what that's going to play out like at Ferrari either, but on paper, you're looking at Ferrari and you're saying, well, you could have an issue there with your drivers if push comes to shove. And McLaren, they also have a very strong pairing. I think there's no doubt about it. This is an issue, that Red Bull do not have, and there is a feeling that maybe, even if they've got a great car, they may not be able to capitalize properly in terms of the drivers' championship result if they run into issues with their teammates. And also, let's not forget, as far as I'm concerned anyway, that Oscar Piastri's manager, Mark Webber, after going through the experience with Sebastian Vettel at Red Bull, will not want that to happen to his, protege, if you want to describe it like that. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.